And yes, we are live. I made sure of it this time.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited. We have a very special guest with us. His name is Rafal Wegiel. Did I say your last name right?
Yes.
So I have a tendency to call him Raf, and I literally just met him live now. So, but I feel like this is a guy that I've known for a long, long time because of, well, he's somebody I look up to. It's kind of weird, eh, Johnny?
It is.
It's not weird in a bad way. It's weird in a good way. I've been going to seminars since 1987, and you pick your heroes, right? You go, oh, I really want to shoot like that guy, and that's a good thing. And Rafal, you're one of those.
Thank you.
There's just a handful. I look at the work and I go, geez, that guy's how does he do it? And there's so many others that are, like, I hate to say it, but like Sal Sincata is awesome, but I don't look at him and go, I want to shoot weddings like him, because he's in a different category. Or even like Peter Hurley, who does headshots. But Rafal, I've had a folder of swipe files from your work for years now.
Because thank you.
I love the way you shoot, and I want to get into that today in today's discussion. I want to remind everybody, this is recorded. We put the replay on YouTube. And if you have any questions, put them in the comment box, and we'll try and answer them. And I'm really excited. But before we get into the content and anything technical or any rabbit holes we jump into, I want to ask you first off, Rafal, give us a little synopsis of your life story. What got you into photography? Sort of the 1-minute synopsis biography, if you don't mind. If we can go from
you
there.
Want a long story or a short one?
I'll take the short story. We only got an hour, so give us one or 2 minutes. Give us the
sure.
Synopsis.
So I was born and raised in Poland. My dad, he was like a back in the days amateur photographer who had a little bit of hobby. And of course, back in the days, there was no digital, so we were shooting film. At that time was extremely expensive, so that was kind of rare occasions where I could even take camera to my hands and shoot. But that kind of gave me a little bit of passion for photography, and I was kind of obsessed with this for most of my life. And and when I was 20, I went to US for student exchange program, and I visited Canada. And actually there was a kind of also interesting story that I was there I came to Canada at the wrong moment, because I left New York City 3 days after before September 11. So I came here, this whole thing happened in New York City, and I was stuck. I couldn't go back.
Right.
And 20 years later, I'm still here. So going back to photography, I pretty much, wanted to pretty much become photographer. So I started as every immigrant, just doing construction jobs, cleaning jobs, whatever I could just, make money. For a short period of time, I also jumped into photography studio for Walmart. So I worked there for 6 months.
Really?
Yes, and the funny thing, they fired me because I was taking their clients and I started shooting them privately. So at some point, this whole thing came out and they let me go. But it was a good experience. It was, the first kind of like a professional job where I could shoot and learn a little bit about selling. And then I actually got into wedding photography, because that was just the kind of bread and butter for many, many years. The digital kind of came along and kind of makes things easier. So I went from pretty much the first year, I started with 4 weddings, and I went into 40 weddings a year.
Nice.
For many, many years. I traveled the world when it comes to shooting weddings. I've done this for 10 years. Then I started kind of getting a little bit burnout, and I was just kind of tired of it. Not to mention that at that moment, a lot of, there was like so many wedding photographers that the prices start kind of like, collapsing, and it was much harder to get clients. So I still want to stay in the industry, but I figured I have to do something different, something that kind of keeps me in industry, but I can stay kind of away from weddings. So that's how this whole thing came in when it comes to headshot photography, because that was just the beginning of this whole genre of shooting headshots.
Mhm.
As I mentioned before we start, I was really inspired by Dylan Patrick and his work, and nobody was doing that in Calgary. So just like, let's try. Was hard at the beginning because to learn all, like, going from weddings and running around shooting pretty much available light, going to any lighting systems, and then shooting with flashes and all this stuff. That was just like, it was kind of interesting because after 10 years you kind of think, oh, I know everything about photography now, and then you get
Mhm.
few lights and you have no idea what to do with them, and every pictures which I took was garbage.
Oh,
So
really?
that took me quite a bit of time to create this kind of own style, and just kind of be more creative. But yeah, and then I try to kind of do some different stuff, right? Like, I know it's easy to say to do something different because everybody doing pretty much everyone's trying to be different and have own style and unique things to which they can kind of implement in their work. But that was like, I was shooting headshots for like 4 years for completely free.
Okay.
I was
Really?
trying to get, oh yeah. So like, I was a kind of transition. So I was still shooting weddings. So that was kind of paying the bills, but I was trying to get everybody who I could at the
Mhm.
front of the camera to learn about headshots.
Okay.
And when I started feeling that, okay, this whole thing is under control, I know a little bit more, I am kind of getting the stuff what I'm happy with, then I just kind of like ditch the weddings and just go full time with headshots.
So you ditched weddings how many years ago,
Um,
roughly?
we have 2022, I think, like 10 years ago.
So were you? It sounds to me like you were very successful at weddings, in spite of the fact that the competitive pressures and the pricing pressures were afflicting you and everyone else has been the industry for last 10 years or so. So you said you traveled a lot for your weddings. So I'm just curious, more than anything, why were you traveling with weddings? Were you like in demand in all these different areas? And
So the weddings, I think at some point, destination weddings become really popular,
yeah,
and a lot of my clients, they want to have a wedding, let's say in Caribbean, so
okay,
Jamaica, Cuba, you name it.
right, right,
People are traveling, and they were just taking me with them.
okay,
Some of those places, yeah, there are some issues sometimes because they have own photographers, right? They don't want
Mhm.
to have outsiders. But also, I was lucky. I went to India twice.
Nice.
Clients who live in Calgary, they decided to do the wedding in India, and there was kind of interesting stories with that because, well, first of all, like, there was no even option me going to India, but I've done the engagement session and they're like, oh, we love this work, like, why
Okay.
don't we take you with you? So the parents were against it. And there was some kind of fight within the family, but the couple's like, we want this guy. And the interesting thing was also, which was kind of good for me, they hired kind of like their wedding photographer there, and they allow me to shoot my kind of thing, right? So they kind of let me do whatever I want. I was not in charge for any like family photos, which was fantastic.
Okay.
I could
Nice.
just shoot just photojournalistic kind of style. But
Yeah.
so we could go like really deep into this, but for me, just even going to India, like, I remember when I landed there the first time, it's just like, what the hell I'm doing here? Like, just like, why? Like, why I'm here? So cultural shock, this
Mhm.
whole thing, the wedding itself, the wedding had 3,000 people, just to kind of give you idea how big it was.
So they had money, obviously, and they were
You
good,
know
willing.
what? Yes and no, because the guy he's an IT guy.
Right.
So I don't feel like he was making, I would say, decent money. I don't think he was like extremely wealthy. I think
Mm.
when you convert that money there, maybe it's a little bit of a different story. But in India, I found wedding is a completely different level. Like, for them, wedding is like the most important event of their life. And then they have this massive complexes where they do the weddings. Uh,
Wow.
just insanity. Like, they have this like altar made out of like fresh flowers, and they have like 200 people working on it before the night of the wedding.
Wow.
Just crazy. I think
You never
there
you
would
never
be
seen.
amazing documentary if someone would just decided to do like a documentary about
Okay.
Indian weddings. I think that would be just spectacular. Like they have elephants, like you name it. Just the craziness behind it. I was just like watching this. I'm just like what's going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not familiar with any of that up in their
No.
North American cultural limitations. But so let me ask you this then, and I want to get off weddings and into headshot
Yes.
photography. But the fact that you quit doing weddings, you burnt out. I still love shooting weddings. John's with you; he's done shooting weddings years ago, and I just curious. Every time I think of destination weddings, I cringe. I think to myself, I've done a bunch, and I'm like, I can't stand them because you're gone for a week. Even if it's in the Caribbean, I think to myself, it's like I get bored with that after 2 days, and
Yes.
you know what I mean. And so the fact that you had to travel with, I don't know what the percentage of local versus destination weddings you were shooting, but did that contribute to your burnout?
A little bit. I think when my son was born, that everything kind of changed, right?
Okay, there you
That
go.
was the moment where okay, I need to focus on my family and I want to focus on
Yeah,
him. I don't want to, as you said, leave for a week and just kind of be on the
yeah.
phone or Skype
All
or
right.
whatever just to see them. But
Yeah.
also, I think just the tension I found from the weddings. I think the people were way more demanding, and then there's some crazy stories happening on some of those weddings.
hmm hmm
And I was just like, you know what, I have enough. Like I don't have to fight with people. I
Yeah.
want to do work where I have a little bit more control, and I can kind
Yeah.
of do things my way sometimes, because as you guys probably know, the weddings is a chaos, right? Sometimes it's
hmm
controlled, sometimes it's not. But after like shooting, let's say some kind of cultural wedding, like Chinese wedding or Indian wedding, usually it's a 2-3 days. So after those 2-3 days, like I need like 2 weeks to get back to my mental state, because you just work for 16 hours a day,
Yeah. Yeah. Enough
like
of that.
crazy.
Enough of that. So,
So
but your boy was that was the
yes,
locus of control, the big change, the family thing. Yeah,
absolutely.
that makes perfect sense. So, I gotta ask you this now about you doing 4 years of free shooting. Obviously, you were shooting weddings, so you had income coming in, but you're doing 4 years of shooting headshots. Was it because you never felt, "Oh, I haven't got this yet. I've got this certain vision, a certain level I want to get to," and or what was it that stopped you from after 1 year saying, "Okay, I'm going to start charging for this"? Is there something there that you can discuss, or?
Yes. So when I started shooting headshots, and then this is what always kind of makes me laugh when people are like, well, what's difficult about shooting headshots, right? Everyone says that these days, and it's like not big of a deal, but it
Mhm.
is. And I've noticed, well, I started with a lot of struggles. First of all was the lighting. I might have to switch to completely different equipment, learn how to work with lights, because when I was shooting weddings, I never had any kind of off-camera flash or anything like that. I was just
Okay.
purely natural light
Uh-huh.
photographer. Like I sometimes I was using flash, which was stuck, like was connected to my camera during the
Mhm.
receptions, but I never had like any off light, during
Mhm.
the weddings. So this was completely new to me. So that's something which I had to learn, right? Another thing which was big challenge was retouching, because I just, when it comes to weddings, again, basic retouch, maybe some color adjustment, just basic stuff. Especially, I remember when I started shooting weddings, everything was about quantity, not the quality per se, but the quantity. Like, and people were buying my services because I was shooting 2,000 images. I was shooting 2,000, 3,000 images per wedding, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is just amazing!" Right? That was kind of the selling point. But who in the right mind would have a time to retouch 2-3,000 images? Like,
Mhm.
we were just shooting JPEGs, burn on the DVD or some kind of like CDs and just give it to the client, and that was it. Sometimes I was trying to push some sales when it comes to weddings, some prints, but there was no like really digging into Photoshop and try to you know do the kind of proper retouch. I'm guessing right now it's a completely different story. This whole thing just went to completely different level, and I photographers do that these days. But back in the days when the digital started, like nobody was spending too much time on in Photoshop. So going back to headshots, I knew I have to learn retouching, right? And I had to somehow figure this out. So I went different paths at the beginning. So I was just outsourcing my images to different retouchers. I was not happy because I felt like it's not my work anymore.
Mhm.
Plus, I didn't understand the process. I was getting back those images. They look cool, but I was just like, was driving me absolutely nuts that I don't understand what they've done to it.
Okay.
So I started kind of again learning the retouching process, and then you starting
Okay.
kind of putting this whole thing together. So I think the headshots, what headshots taught me over the years, that it's a process. It's not just snapping the photo. It's creating images, which you have to have proper equipment, proper lighting,
Mhm.
proper retouching. And then on the top of that, I started also realizing I need to learn other skills, such as communicating with people. I need to
Mhm.
learn the body language, psychology, face expressions. And then you start digging into this, it's another completely different game
Hmm.
ball. You have to jump into it and learn so many things which I would never expect I would have to even touch, right? So
Mhm.
so that's why I think what changed the headshot photography, that nowadays photographers, they need to understand all those components and put them together. And that was my biggest challenge, and took me years and years to figure this whole thing out. And I'm
Mhm.
still learning. It's like, it's not like I know all of it right now. I think the more I dig into it, the more there's still more things to learn.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
What's
With
amazing, I know photographers who don't do a lot of retouching, they outsource everything, and they seem to get really good results. But
Mhm.
for you, you have this compelling urge to want to understand at a deeper level.
Yes.
So I'm going to sort of pin that on you as part of one of your attributes, and that is an important attribute that sort of compels you to want to constantly be learning, recognizing the importance of learning. And for whatever reason, you wanted to know more. I mean, how are they doing this retouching? And obviously, I'm not going to say mastered, but you've gotten a handle on it because,
Yes.
now you're teaching other photographers. And by the way, everybody, go to Raf's website. Johnny, maybe you could put it up
I
again.
have it here. Yeah.
And Rafael's got Spotify and FM Anchor. He's got, I don't know if you're doing weekly podcasts. I started listening to them and I'm like, holy geez, this guy's generous with all his work. I think it's under workshops or
Yeah.
something.
Well, there's workshops and there's also store.
But the access to all his podcasts, and you've got a YouTube channel, which I signed up for. I'm like, this guy's really, really generous with his work and his content. He's just putting it all out there. And obviously, you're obviously selling some of it, and you've got some live events coming up, which we're going to plug in a minute. But this compulsion to want to constantly be learning is something that I personally feel is really, really important. And I recognize it in you, even to the point that I'm like, man, you even though you only spent 6 months at Walmart, I mean, wow. Walmart.
I lasted about a week. I
Oh,
think.
really?
Were you there too, Johnny?
Yeah, we're somewhere around 2002, 2000, and yeah, I lasted about a week.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
was
used
doing some crazy stuff over there. I don't think I should share, but I was,
to
yeah,
give
like
us one
I
example
was,
of crazy.
yeah. So
What's one example of something crazy you
one
did?
example, I didn't want to work there because that was just kind of extra job for me. So I
Mhm.
was doing lifeguarding, believe it or not, at one
Mhm.
of the local pools here in Calgary, and that was just extra job, which
Okay.
could bring me some extra money. And they hired me right away. And sometimes I was so tired because, for example, like I was opening the pool at, let's say, 5 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
work till 2, and then 4 o'clock I started shift at Walmart portrait studio, and I
Mhm.
was so beat up that I was just like barely kind of like keeping my eyes open. So like let's say they booked, I don't know, 6 7 people, and I was calling them that, for example, like the camera's broken, and then we have to cancel and just move it to another day. So I was
Oh.
those shifts to some other people, so I
Okay.
could just kind of stay alive and just kind of survive the shift, right? But they
Right.
figured this whole thing out at some point, and
They
it's
did.
like, yeah, they did, yeah. But try to survive, right? Make some
You were
money.
surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let me get back to the topic of survival for a minute.
Yes.
When I found out you were from Poland, my first question that popped in my brain is there something in the water there? I mean, Maggie Habieta is from Poland. She moved to Canada when she was 16. Do you know Maggie from Oakville?
No, I
Okay.
didn't ring the bell, but
Yeah,
okay.
she started her own studio about 12 years ago.
Okay.
And at a time when it was like insane to start a studio, and she bought a building in Oakville. Oakville is a very nice area just west of
Very
Toronto.
high end.
And she bought her own commercial, you can buy your own sort of like a commercial condo. And she went to town. It's amazing. She's one of our favorites. We've had her on this, and I've had her speak at many of my live events, and she's a crowd favorite. And she's from Poland.
About a half an hour outside of Toronto where she is.
Okay.
Yeah. So she to quote her, she said she went to the moon with a shovel. She had no idea what she was doing, but she made it work. Her story is amazing. She moved here from Poland and went to art school, and she's got a very, very strong business flair, marketing flair, networking flair, and a very strong artistic flair. But anyways, yeah, so that was my first question in my mind was, is there something in the water in Poland that's really making these people sort of click? But you said you had to do what you had to do working for Walmart. And I recognize the value of working at a high volume place like Walmart. I don't know that it gets any more high volume than Walmart, but there's a lot you can learn working with that many families. And it's not like they're coming in all dressed up, right? It's a different demographic.
It is
A lot of babies.
Yes.
So what lesson, besides the fact that you were trying to juggle 2-3 jobs at the same time and you had to sort of rig the bookings, what lessons for you that you got from working with that many people, or were there any dealing in a high volume situation like that?
So let me start with saying that I didn't want to work there.
No.
To be honest, it was something that I just kind of like want to stay, and I want to do something what is related to photography. And at that point, that was my only option, because my wedding business was not even alive at that moment.
Right.
And I thought that this is going to be something that kind of gets me closer where I want to be. I couldn't do full-time job because I could just maybe get a job at one of those photography stores in Calgary. But I remember, I was applying to them, and they told me you have to work, full time. You work, of a commission, and I couldn't kind of also afford that. Also, I was never a big fan of gear itself. Like you guys probably, whoever is following my work and then whatever I try to pass to other photographers, equipment for me is like a secondary thing. I don't pay attention to it.
Okay.
I have what I have, and I used it the best way as possible. But I'm not kind of like this one of gearheads who just focus only on the gear. And I thought that this place will give me some knowledge about photography and kind of brings me closer to the industry. Even though it was what it was, the whole system they set up over there also was kind of interesting, because you didn't have to be photographer at all. Like they just hire anybody, because you have to just push the button, right?
Right.
What I've learned though, I've learned lots about communications with people. I've learned how to deal with them. I've learned a little bit about selling stuff, because they push sales. That was just the main thing. They didn't care much even about the quality of photography as much you can sell at the biggest packages. I wasn't good at it. Plus, that was kind of beginning of my time when I came to Canada. So my language also wasn't good enough. And I struggled with English at that time. So also I figured if I'm gonna work in that place, that's gonna also help me with the language. And yeah, so I started there. I have some great manager. Like she was fantastic. She was really supportive. She taught me a lot of stuff about sales and different packages and how to communicate with people. So overall, I think it wasn't bad. I'm not kind of remember this as something that was negative experience. I think for all those people who are trying to get into the industry, I think they should try something like this, because they can learn some other skills which are really, really helpful if you start your own business, right?
Yep.
And if you make mistakes, you have someone who is overlooking some of the stuff what you do, and they can give you some kind of guidance. And even though the Walmart has this kind of reputation, I think people who work there, I think they're fantastic. I remember it as a kind of something really, really positive.
That's amazing. So one lesson I'm going to also suggest, and or from my own experience, is humility. When I started out, I was doing similar jobs, and I was so hungry. Didn't bother me that I was doing. It's just the idea was take any job you can because you just want to grow. That's what it sounds like to me. And plus survival for you.
Yes.
Interesting. So you had extra hurdles to overcome because of your language barriers and the fact that you were from another country. So I've often, in my experiences, noticed that people who have similar experiences like that, they come out ahead because of those challenges, because of those hurdles, because they overcome them. And I'm, again, curious. I want to go back to your headshots now. It took you years to sort of master the headshots. Now, I got to tell you right out, I do a lot of headshots, but I can't do them the way you do. I keep going like, what the hell's the matter with me? John, do you feel the same way? I don't know
Yes,
if you do.
there's times where I think I've got it, and then I get home or to the studio and I upload to the computer. And it's like, this doesn't look like theirs does.
So what is that magic mojo, that extra? If you even zoom in on one of those, and you have this beautiful control of light. You talk about your limitations with light, which obviously is not the case. I don't know if you got it or if you're shooting intuitively and it just works for you, but
I just love how he's a minimalist, because he only uses like the 2 flashes, maybe one on the background, and it's all speed lights.
Right? Yeah, and you've got that stuff throughout your blogs, and you explain all of it, and but there's a je ne sais quoi, there's a boom. What is that? Am I making any sense, or am I?
Yeah, there's a life to them that some people just can't get.
I'll share all the secrets with you guys. I don't see a problem with that.
Yay!
We can break this whole thing. So let me start with saying that, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, creating a headshot, and I think we can apply this to any type of photography. I believe it's a process. It's not like you just put someone at the front of the camera, you snap the photo, and it's done. So let's kind of break this process and what we have to focus on. And this is something which, again, took me years to figure out. And this is something which you just learning as you go, right? And you just kind of discovering new things throughout your experiences taking photographs. So let me start with, as I said, we need to break this entire process to smaller components, right? And I have 7 of them, which is, gear, there is settings, there is lighting, there's face expressions, there is body language, and there is retouching. So there's all those components we need to put together. And usually what I'm saying is like a example how this whole thing works is like making a cake. For example, you have to have all the ingredients, you have to have recipe, you have to mix them all together, you have to put them in the oven has to have specific temperature. So there's process to it, in order to get a cake. And the interesting part is, if you messed up one of those elements, this whole thing's go to the garbage, right? Because you can have the best oven, you can have the best recipe, you can have the best ingredient, but let's say your eggs are like old and they're stinky, this whole thing goes out, right?
Right.
And I think the same applies to photography. If you messed up one element, the image is off, right? So in my tutorial, I basically teach about it, that you have to focus on each of those elements. And then also, when you break this whole process to smaller elements, it's much easier to identify what's your work is lacking, right? Because you might have, let's say, the best gear, the best lighting, but for example, like your face expression is off, right? There's something not right. Doesn't matter how good the image is, how good the lighting is, how much you do the retouching, the image is going to be off and it's not going to be right. So that's why, what I'm trying to say to all the students, what I teach, and the message, what I'm trying to push is, you need to break down the process. You need to kind of like chop it down and look at it at all of those elements separately, and then basically try to figure it out how to master each of them, right? And what's kind of bothers me a lot these days is, and it kind of drives me nuts, to be honest with you, that we focus only on those all those like a little elements or one element. And
Right.
I'm getting sometimes comments like, oh, the lighting is perfect. The lighting is not perfect, because when you get the raw image, there's still a lot of flaws to it, right? You need to take and do retouching on the image to polish the image so you can get the lighting kind of like the way you want it, right? So again, another example, the face expressions, the squint, as Peter Harley says, the
Squinch.
body language, squinch, how you pose your subjects, how you communicate with them, how you get this engagement, so again, we could go really deep into all those elements. But what the main message, what I'm trying to say is you have to look at your photography from much broader perspective. And that's why we had this little discussion. I started studying psychology and body language and face expressions, and kind of talk to psychologists, what specific face expressions say, how we can pull them out of people, how we can recognize them. So I think what I've done with my headshots, I dive deeper, beyond lighting and equipment. I started understanding human. I tried to understand, as I said, the body language. I was trying to understand a little bit more face expressions and implement that into my work. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying.
Very
Yeah,
much.
it does.
I think the other 5 elements can be taught very easily through a book or through, when it comes to equipment, when it comes to settings, lighting, all that stuff. But when it comes to body language and facial expression, that's what makes the photo, I think.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you got to learn that.
Absolutely. And this whole thing also, it's a process when it comes to learning, because I believe that it's really hard to learn those things just from books or from tutorials or from YouTube videos. You have to literally take your camera and start shooting and analyzing your images, like not just, oh, I like this image, but understanding why I like this specific image, what makes this image likable, and what I've done right here that makes some kind of feeling that we some kind of have some connection with the image. And I think a lot of photographers, they don't do that. And yeah, I remember going back to the weddings, I never analyzed my images. I was just like shooting them. I was just keep going through them, okay, up to the client. And
Right.
when I started shooting headshots, I started really putting a lot of attention to not only shooting but going back to my work and analyzing it, and just try to, as I said,
Okay.
break it down and understand deeper what I can see, and what the image represents.
That's it. I mean, really, when you think about it, and I think you're hitting a nail on the head. And so it's good advice. And what you're saying is you take your images, no matter what you're shooting, and analyze them afterwards, sort of critique them, and or maybe have somebody else help you get some feedback as well, and look at where you're not happy, look at where you can improve, look at where
If I can speak on that, I wouldn't really push it to giving your work to analyze by somebody else, because I think, and again, you don't have to agree with me, but everyone looks at images differently, right? Everyone kind of analyzes them differently, and it also depends on your knowledge, how much experience you have, how much knowledge you have, and then you can look at those images from completely different perspective. And typically I found people, they never gonna say, if you ask someone, hey, can you tell me what you think about those images. They're not going to be nasty to you and like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is. But I think we can do that to ourselves, right?
Okay.
We can really say, hey, I screw up here. I could do this better. And we can be way more honest. And that's also how we learn throughout this process. That's how we kind of getting better
Yeah.
to not only kind of like analyzing and fixing things. And I want to say one more thing, because I think that is extremely important. And this is also one of those little things which makes people's photography better. And I want to talk a little bit about retouching, because a lot of we talk about it, that I was at the beginning outsourcing my work to other retouchers, and then I was just kind of upset because I couldn't understand the process. But when I started learning retouching, and I said to myself, I need to learn this shit. I need to figure this whole thing out,
Right.
and I'm going to practice every single day. Doesn't matter it's working, it's not working. I'm
Right.
going to just keep pushing through. Like, it's like running. At the beginning it's hard.
Yeah.
We out of breath, but the more we practice, we get better. And then eventually we start kind of really, okay, you know what, I do have a control over this. So that was my plan. And what I also realized, that the more I started retouching my images, I also got better at photography, because then you can really dive deep into, okay, this is what I've done,
Hmm.
this is what I need to fix, this is what I need to kind of like make it look better. So I'm not going to make those mistakes throughout the photo shoots. So that's why also I think my headshots got better, because the retouching helped me to understand lighting even more, right? I could really see what's happening on the image. I could really kind of analyze it, how I can improve those stuffs. And that's why I always say to my students and to people, that don't outsource your images. I know it's easy. I know, like, if you have a big project and you have, I don't know, 100 headshots to retouch, of course send it over. But
Yeah.
make sure that you at least understand the process and you know how to do it.
Good
And the
point.
more you retouch, your photography will get better, because when you get into the photo shoot, I can see things right now before I even push the button, what needs to be fixed, because I had some bad experiences back in the past, and I have to just spend hours of fixing things or retouching stuff,
Hmm.
that now I don't make those mistakes. So you can not only improve your retouching skills, but also what retouching teaches you, understand the light a little bit better,
Yeah.
and also you becoming more aware of a lot of details whenever you kind of get into the photo shoot.
Interesting. Interesting. That's really good advice. It's almost like as if being, and this is, I'm talking from my own experience, because I suffer from this, where yeah, it's good enough, and I don't analyze it. So it's like a tyranny of good enough. It's an affliction. So when I stop, and yeah, I'm going to apply that more and more. I'm going to, just stop and say, how can I improve this? What am I doing that's working? What am I doing that's not working? You said something interesting, though, that you ought to really just take that upon yourself, just between you and yourself. What if somebody doesn't have sort of a direction, sort of a North Star, sort of like a chart of, this is where I want to go? Something must have drove you. It's not good enough, and you were self-critiquing and
Mhm.
learning that was the thing that worked for you. So at what point did you go, oh, this is much better? I mean, you must have had some direction there that sort of compelled you forward.
You know what? To be honest with you, I didn't have any directions. I was just blindly going through it.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can really have a direction,
Well, you
because
knew it wasn't where you wanted to be. There was that. So you were uncomfortable, right?
but you know what? I've seen my mistakes, but I haven't seen the good stuff. I was mostly focusing, okay, what was done wrong and how I can improve it.
Okay,
And
fair
then
enough.
how this whole thing started kind of coming together. But, nowadays we have access to retouching courses, to, like
Yeah.
tutorials and YouTube videos. There's all sorts of resources you can learn the basics, and then you can
Oh,
take it
fair.
to the next level. But when I started, decade ago, I didn't have too many resources where I could even learn retouching. I knew
Yeah.
I want to learn. I know what kind of I want my images to look like, but I
Mhm.
had no idea how to get there. And I can also give you some kind of analogy. It's again, we're going to go back to sports. Let's say you want to go do a marathon, right? Okay, I know I have to run, for like 44 kilometers. You know the goal, but it's hard. Like, you have to practice, you have to
Yeah.
just put time into it, you need to. And also, what I've learned is, before I get there, I just want to say there's interesting book. I don't know if you guys know this guy is Jim Quick. There's a book called Limitless. I'll show you this book. It's really really popular. So this guy, let me kind of give you a brief story about him. So when he was a kid, he had some brain head injury, which caused some brain injury, and then he had really issues with learning, with memorizing things. And basically they started calling him, like, the kid with the broken brain or something like this.
Right.
And he had really hard time to learn. And then he said, you know what, maybe there's different ways to learn things. And he started kind of studying this whole thing. So now he becoming this memory master, where he is working with Obama, with president, CEO. Like, this guy is just insane. The things what he is able to do, speed reading, and all this crazy stuff.
Right.
So his book talks about how we can learn things. So that's basically, this whole book is dedicated to helping people how they can learn stuff. Exactly. That's exactly the book. And one of the things what he's talking about, and this is actually, we can really apply this to this whole retouching thing, that our brain is like a muscle, right? We need to train it to basically get better, to memorize things. We need to somehow put this brain into some kind of work in order to get some results. And I
Right.
remember, when I was started learning how to retouch stuff, I was blindless. Like, I was retouching things, I haven't seen things. It was
Mhm.
just like unbelievable that I was doing things, and I had all this kind of. I've watched, let's say, some tutorial, and they're showing, let's say, frequency separations or dodge and burn and all this stuff. And I was doing the same thing what they're showing on the video, but didn't kind of come out this way. It was just like, what the hell? Like, like, I know they're doing this. I see how they're doing it, but doesn't kind of work for me. I just don't. And the one thing what was interesting, we need to train our eyes and our brain to see things. And I remember the more I was retouching and the more I was practicing, I was getting closer to those results, what I was hoping for. Of course,
Okay.
this was taking a lot of time,
Yeah.
and you need to train your eyes. You need to train your kind of way of seeing things. And then the more you practice, you start seeing things completely different way. So I deeply believe that the retouching is exactly the same process like working
Okay.
out.
That's a good one.
It's yeah, exactly, it's the same process. The more you
Yep.
practice, the more you try, you're getting better, right? And I remember, like, I could tell you like some really interesting story. Even the time of the day, or the lighting you're working around, or how tired you are. I remember this one photo shoot I had was a corporate session, and the guy told me, hey, you know what, I need those images for tomorrow, would you be able to do it? I'm like, sure, why not? I got home, beat up as hell, right? I had a whole day of shooting, and then I came home, and I'm like, I get to get those images retouched.
Hmm.
Get on the computer, start retouching them, and thank you to God, the next morning I woke up. I'm gonna take a quick look at those images before I send them off to this guy. And I look at them like, what the happened here? Like, what I've done? Like, just like and the day before when I finished my work, I was 100% sure I've done amazing thing, amazing retouch. Those images are
Mhm.
great. But because I was tired, because I
Right.
was working with some weird lighting conditions, all sorts of different stuff, and the next day I was just like, holy smokes, like, I couldn't see that before. And that was actually the kind of turning point for me, that I realized, okay, you know what, again, is we see things differently.
Mhm.
different times of the day, and then there's so many different factors which
Yeah,
kind of apply to your vision and how you see things.
that's amazing. That's a really that's a really good answer, and I would anybody who's at any level and whatever wherever you're at, especially if you're starting out and you're younger, I couldn't agree more, and I would really encourage you all to. So I want to ask a couple technical questions. I want
Sure.
to ask you about your wife, and we're going down to our last 15 minutes. I want to remind everybody that in 2 weeks, May 28th, 29th in Toronto at Hark's studio. He's going to Hark's studio. Everybody knows Hark.
Mm-hmm.
They're using his studio in Toronto. Hark Nijar, right?
Yeah.
And if you go to Raf's website, you can find that. So if you want to learn this stuff in person, I highly encourage you to go check it out. Plus, he also has some retouching videos for sale. I think it's like only $100 or something like that. The 2-day event is a little bit pricey, but when you think about it, it's not. It's probably worth 10 times that. $6.99 US, and but man, that'll set the pace for you for anybody who wants to get this. Now, I want to show my screen. I got a question for you.
Yes.
2 questions, more technical, and let me just show my screen.
Just waiting for it to pop up here.
Ba-boom. So you seem to.
Oops, sorry.
Do you see my screen?
Yep.
So you see the shot of the dude with the dark blue
The
suit?
gentleman in the suit. Yep.
You seem to shoot a lot of stuff horizontal,
Mhm.
Eyes up in the tier, top left or top right tier. This was in the middle. Is this, do you get flack from your clients and they're like, that's not centered, or I want it vertical? Is that an
Mhm.
issue?
Not really, actually, because most of my clients at the end of the day looking for square, right, or vertical image, and it's much easier from horizontal to crop this to those two
Okay.
formats,
Mhm.
right? So that was the main reason. But also I found shooting horizontally, it's more pleasing, especially when you look at those images
Yeah,
online, right?
I agree.
Yeah, so that is the main reason. And whenever we have a discussion with the client, and then they have they're fuss about it, that's
Yep.
usually I can explain them why I'm shooting that way. And at that point they understand
Yeah.
why it's much easier to convert them to whatever we need to do later on.
Cool. I can't stand this new Instagram. Everything's vertical.
Oh, it
People,
drives me nuts.
it's like, what are you doing? Especially when they're doing a video of a scene, let's say an accident or something,
Mhm.
and you can only see a thin strip and there's stuff
Mhm.
missing on the right and left. I mean, I think that's awful. Okay, let me ask you about this. See this picture here?
Yep.
That's your setup, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. What's the term that is used when the main light is just skimming? Come on, what is it? Warren always talks about it there. John.
Feathering.
Brand lighting.
Feathering. Okay.
Feathering.
Yeah, you seem to like the main light here seems to be slightly feathered away from her head, and a bulk of that light is hitting the reflector, which creates, I'm thinking. I get this stupid idea when I look at your images and I look at setups like this and I go, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong. That's the only thing I'm doing wrong. I'm not feathering enough. I need to feather it. And when I feather it, I seem to get better results. And it sort of brings a bulk of the light into the reflector, which you have to have properly angled. And it boosts that light back up into the eyes, creating those wonderful specular highlights, which you can see in this guy right here, right? So any comments on that as far as feathering your mane is concerned?
So there's few things which we need to kind of like unfold here. First of all, as I mentioned before, there's no perfect lighting. You just try to make this as best as possible, right? And one of the things, there's few things what I want to point it out. One, a lot of photographers, and including myself, I remember when I started, I was just I planted the light, put whatever 45 degrees to the side, and I was shooting. And then my hope was that this whole thing's gonna turn out well, and rest of it I'll fix it in Photoshop. So that was
Right.
my kind of approach.
Right.
But there's things which we need to remember, that every person photographs differently, and you have to not only work with your subject but also working with your light, but
Mhm.
not just by changing the power, but also by moving the light, and try to figure it out.
Okay.
What's the best angle for a specific person, right? So I always move my light, and because it's a speed light, it's fairly light, I can move back and forth, up and
Right.
down, and try to find the best angle for the
Mhm.
person.
Hmm.
Having said that, there's one more thing what I want to add to it, and I'm going to share that with some story. So I remember I had this corporate headshot session. I'm shooting this beautiful lady, and I had, my main light on the left hand side, my kicker was on the right hand side, and I'm just keep shooting, and I'm not getting anything. Like, there's something about those images that doesn't kind of work, and I'm
Okay.
just trying to feather up and down,
Right.
back and forth, and I was just like, this it doesn't work. Like, I don't know what's wrong with her, because she's beautiful, but those images turn out, they're just like weird.
Hmm.
And what I've decided to do, I'm like, okay, let's do this and let's try it. And I actually move my main light to the left side and the kicker to the right side, just kind of like switch them completely opposite way.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, this whole thing started working. She looks awesome, and I was just like, what the hell? So to summarize this is, every person has better or worse side, and Peter
Okay.
Harley also teaches about it, right?
Mhm.
So every person, what I'm shooting these days, half of my session, the main light is on the right hand side, and the other half is on the left hand side, and it's just switching back and forth just to kind of get the
Okay.
right image. Especially for sometimes for female, I'm shooting clamshell lighting, so there's um no shadows, whatever is more flat. I don't like this much because there's
Okay.
no dimension to the image. So my kind of go-to light typically is the Rembrandt lighting.
Okay.
Mhm.
But in addition, we also have to remember that the images which you guys see on my website, they also went through the retouching process.
Yeah.
So that's something that a lot of people getting confused, because this is what they think is, okay, this is the lighting which you're getting out of, basically you're straight from the camera. It's not
Yep.
true. I'm going to be honest with you. Don't get misled that, you
Yeah.
know, this lighting is the way it looks like. The images go through, as I said, editing process, and
Hmm.
I increase sometimes, the highlights. I
Hmm.
decrease, let's say if the kicker light is too harsh, I kind of burn a little bit just to kind of equalize. So those images go through some additional process to polish the light, right? It's not
Mhm.
just the lighting itself. And I want to also make sure that people understand this, because, you know, the light, it's not exactly what you see. The best way would be probably just showing you the images in the raw, kind of format, and then after retouching, and you could see huge difference
Yeah.
how, those things got a little bit adjusted to kind of make this whole thing work together.
Yeah.
You probably get into that big time on your retouching video course that
Yes.
you sell. Yeah, probably.
And you use a lot of speed lights, like you said, because they're nice and light. Have you ever looked at the new AD 200s from Godox, which are similar to the size of a speed
Mhm.
light, but a little bit more powerful in case you need it when you're outside and stuff?
You know what? So I don't shoot much outside because I live in Calgary, and it's freaking winter pretty much for entire year.
Same here.
So most of my shoots are indoors.
Yeah.
Plus the wind and all this crazy stuff. I found this is really difficult. I remember when I started, I was doing a lot of shoots outdoors,
Hmm.
but I have to tell you, I have so many issues with that. I got arrested because
Oh,
I was shooting in the locations which apparently was private, and they called the cops, and when they saw the lights, all of a sudden you're the criminal.
huh?
So that was, I was like, okay, I'm not, I can't, and it was paid shoot, so like you look
Hmm.
like a total idiot, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the cops coming and handcuff you because you're shooting in some places. And the wind was another big issue because it's really hard, especially in Calgary, to predict the weather. So if you schedule the shoot and you have, let's say, female with long hair and the hair is flying all over the place,
Yeah.
it's a disaster. So
Yep.
that's why I kind of like started really pushing into indoor locations because it was more controllable, was much easier to set it up, was tough at the beginning because I don't have a studio. And this is another little kind of tip for photographers. Studio makes people kind of like, I'm not saying lazy, but what I'm
Hmm.
trying to say is they kind of figured out what works and that's it. And because I was shooting a lot of headshot sessions at my clients' locations, I have to figure it out how to make things work. And even though it was extremely challenging, because you're going to some apartments, you're going to some homes, and then you have junk on the backyard, on the back or something. So that was sometimes really really interesting that
Hmm.
I had to make things work, like for example, this image which is right now, this lady owns, is like a little clinic,
Right.
and we were shooting indoors, the lobby, and there's like little painting, and I was like, okay, let's use that, and then it worked well.
Yeah.
So you
I want
becoming
to ask,
more creative.
I want to ask you about this image because you got all this ambient light coming in,
Yeah.
and obviously you're shooting high speed sync, I would imagine, to kill that ambient light.
No,
But
not necessarily.
no, eh? So
No,
is
you know what? One thing what I do, I just bring those lights really close to my subject. So you really don't need much power, to be honest with you. Like
no,
when it comes to
yeah,
my speed lights, usually I'm shooting one up around 132 of the power. So it's not even full power. So like,
so,
the fraction of it, right?
yeah,
But because the light is fairly close to your subject,
yeah.
then you really don't need
Okay,
pushing more, and you can kill it any aim. And especially even that day was kind of cloudy, right? So it wasn't big of a deal, plus the light is also with the direction of the window light, right? So that kind of like was another kick.
it worked.
Mm.
But if you look at the image, yeah, it worked really well.
So you don't have modeling lights, which I also find interesting as well.
No, no, no.
Who needs modeling lights? These are habits that I've got entrenched in my brain. I call
Mhm.
that CBS, calcified brain shit. It's like this is the way you do it. You got to have modeling lights, and you got to fight that ambient light. So
Mhm.
I'm here to learn, man. I'm here to learn, and I'm learning so much from you, and I'm totally inspired. So we're almost at the end. I wanted to ask you about your wife. There's
Yes.
reasons I wanted to ask you about your wife. You said earlier that she helps you out a little bit in
Yeah.
your business, and but she's also got her own thing going on, which is to do. She's an influencer, so she helps other businesses as an influencer
Yes.
on social media. Can we touch on that real quick so we can sort of?
Yes. Yeah. So well, I would have to go back because for like, right after I got into this retouching the headshot photography. So this is another little story. I know we don't have much time, but I'll try to be quick.
Go for it.
I So one of the things what I've done, and I think this is another good lesson for I think people who trying to and break into this industry. One things which just I figured it out, like I want to work with people who can push my business, right? So I didn't want to just work with just the regular people because I know this might go nowhere. I kind of felt that if I can work with some, I would say, celebrities or known people from the city, they can kind of help me to break into this industry, and they can push my work to their friends. And usually, those guys, they have money, they have some, powers, whatever, they can really help me. So that's how we started. It was called Fashion Calgary Portrait Campaign. And every year for 6 years, we were choosing top influential people in Calgary, and then we were trying to break into some different industries, such radio, TV. We were shooting chefs from the top restaurants. We were shooting politicians, you just name it, athletes. So I
Hmm.
had a chance to work with amazing, amazing people for the 6 years. We shot over 300 people over the 6 years, and at the end of every year, we were doing a big gala where we were raising money for children's hospital. And little story why we've decided to do that was because my wife, about 15 years ago, she lost her brother. He got a brain cancer, and he passed away like literally within 3 days. Like he has a tumor which literally burst, and he just died on her parents' laps.
Mhm.
Like it was tragic story, his story. And we wanted kind of like contribute something. So
Right.
that kind of gave me few things. First of all, really bold foundation for business, because when I started working with some known people, they kind of like started kind of rehiring me. Another thing, what was interesting, because we were getting sponsors for this campaign. Those people who are at the front of the camera, all those like celebrities, they didn't have to pay for the shoot. So what also kind of was interesting, that I think whenever you have a paid client, it changes the dynamic. Like it's just completely different, because the client has some kind of expectations. They coming to you because they want specific thing or specific image, but because they didn't have to pay for it, and there was some cause behind it that were supporting some kind of like big charity. They were giving me completely free hand to do whatever the hell I want, right? So that was also kind of my 6 years of learning process, how to shoot headshots, because
Right.
I could do whatever I want, and I didn't have to kind of like explain myself, that I'm doing this way, or if the images didn't turn out the way they wanted, they were like completely fine with this, right? So that was also kind of like a learning process for me, which gave me free hand to do whatever I want and experiment and learn the things what I want to learn. Plus, the bonus of this whole thing for the 6 years build my business, because now like I work with politicians, I work with big companies, I work with all sorts of different people, because for the 6 years I was shooting headshots for those celebrities, and whenever they need someone these days, they basically just give out my name, right? So that was kind of like, for the long run, was a good investment to build stable business where you can just kind of shoot headshots.
Cool. What
Rob,
about
thank
your
you.
wife? I was just looking at your website, and all of a sudden it's temporarily unavailable. I got an error 1105.
Yeah, mine came up like that too.
Something happened to your
Okay.
website.
Maybe we crashed it. Everybody's gone to look at it now, and they've crashed it.
Maybe, yeah. Let me see
Uh,
here.
yeah. So, anyways, yeah. Well, so I'm trying to figure out where your wife fits and all that. We might have gotten off track.
Okay, so my wife was pretty much organizing the whole thing. So she was, I was just responsible for shooting, and that's what I said to her, honey. You know what? I'm gonna be all for taking photos and creating those portraits, but you do the event. So she was going after, basically sponsors. She was going after, those
Right.
people who we want to have in this campaign. Plus, she was organizing the event, and the event was between 400 to 600 people every year. So it was massive event. And believe it
Wow.
or not, she was doing this on her own, which
Nice.
was, I had no idea how she was doing it, but
Was it like a
somehow she
gala
had.
affair?
Sorry.
Was it like a gala affair?
It was a gala fair. Yeah, we were having exhibition of those portraits. So we have
Right.
one section for the
Cool.
portraits. So the whole idea behind it was that everyone who was photographed, they have to basically write personal note
Hmm.
what arts and culture means to them, and then we were implementing that right up on the image. So that's why when we talk about why my images are like the person is on the left, on the right hand side,
Right. Right.
that came from that, because I had shooting them, let's say, on the right hand side, and I have all this space to put the right up on the image. And I can send you some images, you can see it. So, and then
That'd
we
be
have the exhibition, we had some performances, we had some big celebrities coming in and participating in this whole event. It was quite fun, but then
Yeah.
The market started kind of collapsing a little, and then we are also burnout. And when my wife got pregnant, also like the last one we've done it when my son was 1 year old,
Okay.
and then we're just like, okay, you know what? After 6 years, we need a little bit of break. But
Mhm.
Yeah, this sounds a lot like what Maggie does. She does get a lot of events in her city, very much like a gala red carpet affair, linked up with different businesses. Just an amazing job. All right, so let me ask you a quick question. What's your favorite
yes,
movie? What's your favorite movie?
what's my favorite movie?
Yeah, we know your favorite book. I'm not going to ask you that one.
Okay. Well, there's a
Favorite movie?
lot of them. So I'm originally from Poland, so a lot of Polish movies.
Cool.
But when it comes to American movies,
You're stranded on
there's
an island. You get one movie. What is it?
what is it? Let me go with Armageddon.
Oh, really?
We haven't had that one yet.
Oh,
Sounds
that's-
pretty dystopian.
Yeah. Well, it has a happy end, so that's good. For all the struggles they're going through, there's happy end. And especially I think right now that's happening in the world, I think
Yeah.
we need some kind of unity, because it's going
A
kind of
happy
sideways.
happy ending Armageddon theme.
Yeah.
Everyone feels like we're going through it. The zombie apocalypse is. I mean, oh, there's so much stress going on. So,
Absolutely.
okay, so excellent stuff. I thought I had another question, but you love teaching, obviously. That's the thing, and I encourage everybody to go to Rafal's YouTube channel and check him out on whatever Spotify, whatever you're listening to. And if you want to get more of him one-on-one, do check out the 2-day event he has coming up in 2 weeks in Toronto. So,
Definitely.
what do you think, John? We're good to go.
I think we're good to go.
Much appreciated, Rafal. It was
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you for the invite. I really enjoy chatting with you guys. Absolutely.
I'd like to have you back in another year if you're.
Yes.
that
Anytime.
idea. Cool. All
Sounds
right.
like a plan.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.